You, the audience, will not be surprised to hear us advocating that you should get yourself outside. Get outside. We have been saying from the very beginning. This has been one of our drum beats, one of our mantras from long before we were here before you talking about any of this. And some of that is for reasons that we can point to, and some of it is for reasons that we don't exactly point to, but allude to in many ways in, for instance, Hunter-Gatherer's Guide to the 21st Century, in which we say, you know what? There are things that humans have been doing for, depending on exactly what system you're talking about and how long you want to count, thousands, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands, billions of years, depending, right? And some of those things we know, some of the pieces, parts of what it is that the benefits are, but some of them are likely to bring with them benefits that actually we don't yet fully know. We maybe can't even yet ever know. And if we try to disassociate the benefits from the package in which they have historically come to us, we may in fact negate or even reverse the benefits. So getting outside, I think, turns out to be one of these. So I'm going to set this up in a sort of a little, somewhat counterintuitive way, because it appears at first to maybe run counter to some things that we've talked about, but I think ultimately it doesn't. So we will link to a YouTube video on the YouTube channel MedCram called The Vitamin D Paradox in COVID-19 and Why It Predicts But Doesn't Always Protect. Now, we, of course, have talked a lot about the benefits of vitamin D. Brett did an excellent conversation with one preeminent vitamin D researcher and someone who's a little bit more recently to the game. But, they had a ton of information, and we've also talked with them. And, I've written up a fairly long thing on my Substack about the benefits of vitamin D and why, unlike actually what we wrote in our book, this is one of the few cases where we think actually supplementation, that, taking the piece and taking it into your body that way will be beneficial. And one of the reasons that we argue for our change in opinion is that, unlike almost all of the other things that you might supplement your diet with, those are things that you normally could be getting from a whole food, nutrient dense, closer to its origin diet, whereas vitamin D, for the vast majority of humans, for the vast majority of our history, have gotten most of our vitamin D from synthesizing it through the skin from the sun.
I'll add one thing.
Yes.
I think we have been perfectly consistent, and I hope clear every time we have discussed it, that even though we have argued in favor of supplementation as something that is quite safe and potentially useful, and for those of us who live in the temperate zones, very likely beneficial because we tend to be deficient, strongly tend to be deficient, we have never once argued that you wouldn't be better off getting this through photosynthesis in the sun. Right. So we've been clear about that. The basic point is, failing at getting enough of it from the sun, supplementation is likely to be valuable.
That's right. We have, for instance, I'm going to ask you to quickly show a couple of things on my screen, but then kind of go off of them quickly. We have a paper that finds here pre-infection 25-hydroxyvitamin D3 levels in association with severity of COVID-19 illness. If I may have my screen back, thanks. Sorry, I didn't get to printing everything out this week, so I don't have a backup. Which finds that, so that first paper finds that people with low vitamin D levels before illness are more likely to have bad COVID outcomes. Okay. We have a RCT here, a randomized control trial, they're calling it randomized clinical trial, that finds, here's the title, Efficacy and Safety of Vitamin D Supplementation to Prevent COVID-19 in Frontline Healthcare Workers. And they find that, yes, there is a benefit to that. And however, we have another RCT, which is the one the MedCram video shows and talks about, which is called here, Zach, you can show my screen just briefly. It's a preprint, it doesn't look the same. Vitamin D supplements for prevention of COVID-19 or other acute respiratory infections, a phase 3 randomized control trial. And what they find, surprisingly, is conclusions of the abstract. Among adults with a high baseline prevalence of vitamin D insufficiency, implementation of a test and treat approach to vitamin D replacement did not reduce risk of all-cause ARI, which it's going to be like acute respiratory infection, or COVID-19. They found that baseline vitamin D levels increased, but that that responses to other acute respiratory infections or COVID-19 were not improved. So that runs counter to the previous RCT that I showed. And there's a lot of maybe there are other contributing factors. Maybe the fact that it wasn't very high dosage vitamin D. It was in I don't remember, it was 3,200 IUs per day. They didn't give a bolus dose, as Dr. Benskin has suggested is important. Although the RCT that did find a benefit and the Mexican healthcare workers also didn't use a bolus dose. There are a lot of factors here, right? But it does seem like there may be something additional going on. And here I just want to show. And actually, Zach, if you could put up that first screenshot that I sent you. So I've just got.
So they weren't numbered, so I don't know if that's right.
Yep. So the files are numbered, but they should have come in the numbered order. And here we go. This is from, again, this MedCram video that I will link to as well, in which the guy talking, whose name I've forgotten, I apologize, says, okay, being outside versus inside has more than one effect. It's not just about UV. And of course, it's the UV light that basically photosynthesizes, although I'm always nervous about using that term with humans, but that photosynthesizes into vitamin D in the skin in humans. So yes, we have, if you're outside, you have higher UV, and then you have more production of vitamin D, and that is true. Also, however, when you're outside, you have higher levels of near-infrared radiation exposure. And what that causes, and I'm going to explain a little bit more about this, although I'm not going to go into all of the kind of, frankly, exciting stuff that I've been learning in the last 24 hours about this, higher levels of intracellular melatonin. That's intracellular melatonin, which is different from the circulating melatonin produced by the pineal gland, which is the thing that we think of when we think of melatonin. When we think of melatonin, we think of it being like the nighttime hormone, and it's circulating, it's produced by the pineal gland. Intracellular melatonin is produced by mitochondria and actually appears to mitigate and modulate a lot of things about health, including respiration and metabolism and homeostasis.
All right, so I just want to go evolutionary biologist here on this a little bit. Not surprising to see this same molecule show up in two radically different mechanisms, because basically the point is it's a signal molecule and it works at a distance, and it also works in close proximity. And the physiology of the body can simply, you wouldn't expect it to come up with a whole new signal, because the point is the signal is already evolved and it can be repurposed. And this is something that actually it's not infrequent to see this kind of thing. In fact, neurotransmitters often work on various different systems.
And this is, in fact, yet another example of how our reductionist thinking, like, oh, we figured out melatonin. We got it. We know what it's for. Okay, I think we are correct that we know one of the things that it is for, and even that language makes me nervous. But, apparently the melatonin that is produced by the pineal gland that ends up circulating does appear to be for, in quotes, helping to modulate circadian rhythms and sleep-wake patterns. But melatonin, the molecule, when produced intracellularly by the mitochondria and does not circulate, appears to be about cleaning up about dealing with antioxidants, and basically involved in a lot of cellular health. That it's the same molecule. It's in a different place. It's produced in a different way under different circumstances, and it's doing a different job. And both of those jobs are necessary for us, but they're not the same job.
So it cleans up basically free radicals.
That is one of the things that we now understand, and by we I mean these researchers who have not. This is not very old research.
Yeah,
but this is pretty new. Like the scientific community has understood melatonin as like the sleep molecule, circulating, helps entrain wake sleep cycles for a pretty long time. And I don't know if by long time I mean decades or closing in on a century. But this other function of melatonin is newer to us, the scientific community and humanity at large.
So I will just throw into the mix here that one of the those who have dared to generate early treatment protocols for COVID have had melatonin on the list. And
Absolutely.
it has been a head scratcher for me. Why would this be? And in fact,
That's
I think
exactly right. That's one of the places I was going. Yep.
in a previous live stream, I think we talked about the question of whether or not that is an effect of the molecule or it is an effect of the benefit of sleep, which is well understood to be an important contributor to
And is it related
immunity.
that one of the main symptoms of COVID is deep fatigue? I don't know. I don't know which of these things might be connected or not, but it does seem like there are a number of connections here.
That's really interesting.
Right.
Also raises interesting welcome to complex systems style questions about.
So just like I'm actually, this is brand new to me, but it's even brander new to Brett. Like Brett, this is the first time I told you I want to talk about this, and I'm not going to give you
Right.
I'm not going to tell you what it says. So this is brand new to you right now.
Brand new. So the question then is, well, there's certain things we know now. You might intuit from your own experience, but we know now from scientific work that actually there's certain elements of repair that require you to be dormant, right?
Right.
So that
Right.
the advice to take lots of fluids and get sleep is about more than just not having better advice to give you, but it provides an opportunity to do things, and thereby not sleeping denies your body the opportunity to do things, increases the risk of negative health impacts. But the question, I guess, is if you had a hormone like melatonin that triggered sleep, and there were some aspect of oxidant control that was better deployed during sleep. In other words, if there are, a trade-off between, what your body prioritizes when awake, and therefore,
Well, so one of the things that I'm learning, and this is again new to me, even newer to you, but new to me, is that it is now proposed, and there is some research evidence to support this, that basically near-infrared radiation triggers the intracellular production of melatonin by mitochondria, and it tends to produce an excess, which is then held in reserve for those moments when there's not enough. And that would be consistent potentially with what you're talking about. It would also be, let's see, I was just going to go one other place, but actually this may prompt me to remember the thing I was just going to say. If you could show that second screenshot, Zach, which should just be the next one that I sent you, which relates to a decrease in full sunlight exposure in humans from 1800 to the present day. So this is extraordinary, and this is actually borrowed. You can, for those of you watching, you see at the bottom this Zimmerman and Ryder paper 2019, which I'm going to read to you a little bit from. But this screenshot is from the MedCram video. And actually, can you show that on our smaller screen, Zach, so I can see it? We have via the blue and the red. Blue is visible spectrum light, and red is near infrared spectrum light. And one of the things that I learned today is that near infrared spectrum light, goes through clothes and is highly reflective off of foliage. So even if you're dressed and in shade, if you are outside, you are still getting near infrared spectrum light if the sun is up. Okay, so this is not true for UV for the most part, right? So what we have done as humans is focused on that which we can see, right? That which we can sense. And that, of course, is defined exactly as the visible spectrum. We named it. It's the visible spectrum for us. It's, of course, not the same part of the spectrum that's visible for bees and snakes and other things. But the visible spectrum is that which we can see directly, infrared being off one side, ultraviolet being off the other side of it. All of it, though, the electromagnetic spectrum that we receive from the sun brings value that we have only begun to perceive. So in 1800, we were getting, I know that there's no Y, there's no Y-axis on this, but 2.5 times as much near infrared light as visible light, because we're about 50% outside, and we were also getting it from campfires. So campfires give you near infrared as well. Isn't that beautiful? Isn't that a lovely little thing for us who like to talk about campfire, both literal and metaphorical? Metaphorical campfire doesn't provide you infrared light, but literal campfires do. By 1950,
actually, It can make you hot under the collar.
Not the same thing, though. Really not. So by 1950, the visible spectrum light that humans presumably we're talking about weird humans, Western, educated, industrialized, rich, democratic, etc., were getting was lower, but also so was the near infrared light on account of we had light bulbs, which we didn't have in 1800, but they were 100% incandescent, which do emit near infrared. And we were using plain glass windows in our windows, which let 25% or so of the near infrared through. And, that's supposed to be on a different line. Plain glass windows, which let a certain amount, I don't remember the percentage, of the near infrared through. And the estimate is we were spending about 25% of our time outdoors. By 1990, we've begun to move into fluorescent. Fluorescent does not emit near infrared. And we still got plain glass windows, which are letting some of the infrared through, and we're spending less time outdoors. And by the present time, we've got 100% visible only light bulbs with LEDs and OLEDs and compact fluorescents. So we're phasing out incandescents, even though everyone knows they feel better with incandescent lights, right? And part of why they feel better, I'm going to posit, and I'm sure this is partially true, is that because they are emitting this near infrared light, which we are completely deficient in, we now have low E glass windows, which are great if what your priority is to decrease energy loss and therefore decrease your energy bills and, decrease how much we need to rely on whatever your energy source is. But if energy cost is the only priority, and it's measurable, you can measure how much energy loss there is, and no one has yet figured out, as we hadn't until recently, this thing, and who knows how many other things we haven't figured out, how human health will suffer as a result of low E windows. What you've done with the low E windows is you've also reduced the near infrared light that's getting through them to zero, and we're spending, this estimate is roughly 7% of our time outdoors. Our near infrared light exposure is staggeringly low. And if we go outside, even if we're clothed, even if we're under some cover, we are getting near infrared light. And so at some level, this I'm going to continue to go on, but get outside. Get outside, and don't assume that the vitamin D supplement, which, yes, especially in northern temperate winters and southern temperate winters, the opposite time of year, are likely to be helpful, but it's not the only thing that you should be doing.
All right, that's fascinating.
Is your mind blown?
My mind is blown.
Yeah.
I will say that if we keep saying near infrared, then we sort of obscure what's actually happening here, which is that we are getting more and more efficient. Yes. And the point is...
What you mean, our technology in terms of our built environment?
Yes. Yeah. What I mean is, you think, just like with milk, right? What is breast milk? It's food. Hey, we can replace food with other food. Yeah. Well, what if it's
food is food? Vaccines are vaccines. Peer review is peer review.
Right, exactly. And so the point is, the joke, all of us who have, worked on anything with a limited energy budget, the joke is that an incandescent bulb is a heater that happens to put out some light. Right. It's terrifically wasteful. Yeah. And so as
ooh, ow, why did I just try to unscrew a bulb that was just on? Try that with an LED. It's fine.
Well, LEDs are somewhat, CFLs are, first of all, I should say, as you know, I've been ranting about CFLs for decades. These things were never green. They are efficient, but they were never green, and they were never healthy. They were a disaster. And the idea that people have had these things in their homes and been breaking them and releasing mercury and not realizing how much mercury they had just put into their environment, it's insane, right? That was a con. LEDs are way better, but still.
This is branding. Call it green. You'll get a lot of people to buy it. It's actually, there are a lot of us who really do give a damn, who really do care and are not buying your tokenism of if we call it green, you're going to buy it because we know you're that much of a sucker.
Well, actually, this goes to one of your themes. The tyranny of metrics thing, which is, to the extent that we can measure something like how much coal has to be burned at the plant in order to make this light bulb put up enough light to do your work, the answer is yes, CFL is pretty good, right? If you were going to do the equivalent of the all-cause mortality thing, it's a frickin' disaster, right? Yes. It misinforms your pineal gland. It puts mercury in the environment all over the goddamn place. It messes up your sleep cycles. It's it's a disaster.
And as it turns out, it reduces your access further to near infrared, which is important for dealing with the oxidants that you are generating because you got a crap diet and a bad lifestyle, which is also fed to you by, we moderns are living the greatest life imaginable. It's like, in some ways, yes, but that doesn't mean we have to buy every solution that is handed to us, because many of them are bad and some of them are bad and we don't know why yet. But if we are thinking, not sure about that one, maybe trust your instinct and think on it more.